AD carries are a very confusing breed of champions. The class by nature is designed to be vulnerable, generally self-insufficient, and needing to rely on their teammates in order to exercise their pressure to the fullest. For many, marksman champions make easy prey to engage on, especially when alone. On the other end of the spectrum though, marksmen elicit some of the most inflammatory reactions among the cast. Combining their ranged auto-attack nature and ability to consistently output DPS, they truly live up to their reputation as the carry for their team. Notably from a distance, where a number of champions cannot immediately retaliate in kind. You can argue they possess an advantage in one way or another over every other class in the game, solely because of them being allowed to attack at such a consistently high rate from a far distance. No one encapsulates this more than Vayne, a cast member who is regarded to this day as one of the most iconic hypercarries of all time. She also happens to be the most hated marksman in the game, even more than Draven, Samira, and Twitch, believe it or not. What about her attracts disproportionately more backlash than appears? For today's episode of Why Everyone Hates, we'll be finding out what's the deal with the Night Hunter, and how her design in particular draws the vitriol that it does. Really quickly though, before we get into it, I just want to give a shout out to this video's sponsor, Ironside, who was actually kind enough to send me their product they're selling in question. Ironside, for those who don't know, is a computer building service that puts together gaming PCs for you, either through you choosing your own parts for them to put together or selecting one of their pre-made ones. The one they sent me in particular was the Eden's Veil, which has a nice natural aesthetic to it, and even a wood panel on the front, which I think is the first time I've ever seen a tower case have a wood part to it. In the footage, I took off the stained glass panel to showcase the inside, but I can imagine it looks really cool with the glass covering the lights inside. As someone who builds computers myself, everything was put together really nicely, even right down to the cable management, of which they sent a couple extra zip ties for me in case I ever wanted to add more stuff to it, which is nice. In other news, Ironside's hosting a giveaway for one of their milk box computers, valued around $3,000, featuring a Ryzen 7 9800X3D and a 5070 Ti, not too bad, which is running from now until the 29th of May, so if you're interested in checking it out, be sure to use the link in the description below. Ironside's a good company, I can vouch for them myself. They're pretty solid, especially if you're not confident with building your own PC from scratch. Definitely check them out. Thanks again to Ironside for sponsoring the video, but for now, back on topic. Let's first explain by expanding on what I meant earlier by possess an advantage in one way or another over every other class in the game. Marksmen are a truly interesting type of champion. They can do so much, yet you'd be hard-pressed to say they can fend for themselves in most cases. Mages can exploit AD carries in range or burst damage. Assassins and divers can rush them down and overwhelm them through sheer force. Juggernauts, assuming they're in close quarters, can face tank their hits while dealing equal punishment. Skirmishers feel like they were built to shut down marksmen. Even tanks can stat check marksmen into oblivion. So what exactly do I mean when I say marksmen can theoretically beat every other class in the game? Putting it simply, it has a lot to do with their original name, attack, damage, carry. See, the reason back in the day, of the 5 roles, the only one that clearly established who was meant to be played there was ADC, was because it was the only class that could truly respond to all manner of threats. Mages have a ton of DPS and range, but for many of them, their reliance on skill shots and cooldowns places hard limitations on what they can do, alongside their consistency and uptime. Assassins and divers have incredible front-loader burst potential and can end fights right as soon as they start, but there's always a possibility that the enemy team can survive their attack, putting them at a huge disadvantage. Skirmishers are objectively the highest DPS class in the game thanks to many of them having equal staying force as a marksman, but having better mobility, self-sufficiency, and potentially other things. However, their melee nature leaves them vulnerable to getting kited. If you think about it, marksmen are the only DPS champions in the game whose limitations can be addressed both intrinsically and extrinsically, which is why they were the only class in League that was practically obligatory to have in every single game. They're the most consistent carry class. Where Vayne falls under all this is that for a long time she was one of the few if not only marksmen in the game who came very close to having the strengths of a marksman without the weaknesses of one. The primary objective of an ADC is to shoot whatever's in front of them, doesn't matter who it is. They would prefer to focus down priority targets on the enemy team, but so long as they're hitting something, they're doing their job. Usually the best way to stop a marksman is to place a big body in front of them like a tank or juggernaut. Even though they can eventually tear through them, the more time the marksman spends breaking through the enemy front line, the more time you have to take them out. Vayne's that one marksman that no one wants to tank. If we go by pure single target DPS, few if any can match her rate of fire because of silver bolts, the first instance of % max health true damage in the game, and if you ask me, it should have been the only instance. % health damage can be mitigated through armor and magic resist in lieu of health, since building health would do nothing to stop how much it does. True damage can be mitigated through health in place of armor and MR, since building either would do nothing to stop the amount of damage it does. But if you have % health true damage, there's no way to itemize against it. Of the 26 marksmen we have in the game, Vayne has the best tank busting period. She also typically supplements her build with on-hit effects like Blade of the Ruined King and Rage Blade, allowing her to proc silver bolts and burn through even super tanks like Scion and Cho'Gath in record time. That's problem number 1, you can't do anything to respond to her DPS. Secondly, because silver bolts guarantee a minimum threshold of damage regardless of who you're fighting, Vayne doesn't have to necessarily itemize into full DPS. Most other marksmen are required to build full damage to keep up with enemies getting progressively tankier, but with percent max health true damage being effective no matter how much armor or health they have, the only real priority for Vayne is to get enough attack speed. Blade of the Ruined King and Rage Blade likewise also scale proportionally. If it wasn't apparent to you yet, here's the best way you can think of Vayne's damage as.
I am inevitable.
You have been slain.
There are 2 other ways a person can also deal with a marksman. Unfortunately, neither of them are any easier to accomplish than the first problem. Second way is to try and play the range game. Though marksmen have decent range, certain champions can potentially still exceed the standard 550 attack range and play the neutral game as best they can. The issue with this is that Vayne's kit was expressly designed for pursuit. Night Hunter grants bonus movement speed when moving towards visible enemy champions. Even at base, 30 move speed is generally sufficient at making up the tempo lost from standing still to auto attack. When tripled to 90 while using her Night Hour, it's extremely difficult for champions to run away from her. Granted, other marksmen are capable of pursuit as well, like Draven when he spams Blood Rush, or Lucian attacking a target affected by Ardent Blaze, but usually, if you can put immediate distance between you and the enemy marksman, they lack the stick potential to chase after you a far distance. Tumble and Night Hunter make it rather difficult for you to escape from Vayne unless you have some kind of OD mobility tool like Zeri dashing over a wall. Blade of the Ruined King also has a slow, making it even more difficult for you to kite her out. That's what separates Vayne from other marksmen with dashes. They can reposition very quickly in bursts, but Vayne has consistent tempo when chasing or moving around people. Many champions flat out have no way to disengage from a Vayne, nor do they have any way of avoiding her pressure. Remember, marksmen don't have to worry about skill shots, unless your name is Ezreal or Zeri. The only condition for Vayne to apply her pressure is if she's in range to attack you. Dodging and weaving won't work against her. You can diminish the impact of other percent health true damage sources like Fiora and Garen by exploiting their need to get close. But with her attack range and ability to chase you down with her passive, there's no kiting Vayne. If you can't put serious distance between you and her immediately, your only option is to stand your ground and fight, but by doing so you're playing right into her hands. Problem number 3 is that Vayne's one of the most difficult marksmen to engage head-on since her kit is specifically meant for 1v1 duels. Tumble's ridiculously short cooldown and quick animation gives her an instant reposition tool every 2 seconds, not to mention it more than doubles the damage of her next basic attack. Despite moving a short distance and not being able to go over walls, one could make a case that Vayne's dash eclipses that of Lucian, Ezreal, Graves, Corki, so on purely for the fact that it's spammable and quick. She can use it to sidestep critical skill shots, she can use it to get in range for one more auto, she can use it to put more distance between you and her. The average dash ability you find on a marksman has a cooldown of anywhere between 15 to 25 seconds, so when you see Ezreal burn Arcane Shift, that's your ticket to rush him down and blow him up. For Vayne, she can tumble literally every other second. Give her any movement speed and maybe even a way to slow you down like Bork or Red Buff, and if her tempo is faster than yours, you can't run away from her nor can you attack her either. She flat out checkmates the majority of melee champions in the game, even those with dashes. Frustrating matters even more is that she has 2 other defensive abilities that make it much harder for you to stay on her once you do get in range. Being a range attacker, most champions have to burn their dash ability just to get within striking distance of her. They might be able to overcome her tumble and all that, but then there's Condemn, a quick projectile that knocks you back to roughly around her attack range, so you'll need 2 dash abilities to keep up with her. But even if say you were to have 2 dash abilities, she has yet another way to make it difficult for you to hit her. Final Hour's invisibility. Vayne can go invisible for upwards of 8 times per cast of Final Hour when you account for the cooldown reduction on Tumble. Used correctly, she'll break your ankles trying to fight her. You guys remember how annoying fighting Kha'Zix with his ultimate is, right? Final Hour is basically an infinitely better version of Void Assault. She can auto go invis, auto go invis, auto go invis, positioning herself to avoid your attacks while at the same time looking for an opportunity to condemn you into a wall. She has like 5 different ways to make herself as difficult to hit as possible. Most champions can adequately respond to one of her options, some can deal with 2, a select few can deal with 3, but almost no one can deal with all of her shenanigans. Not by themselves anyway. A way to stop her completely is through crowd control, but crowd control is a silver bullet for any and all champions. Tanks and juggernauts with that point and click CC can forget about fighting her. She'll kite the living daylights out of you, shredding half your HP or more before you can even land a single hit on her. Divers can't really deal with her that well either, since like I said, if you burn your dash ability, she can tumble condemn you, so you have to dash on her again. Certain mages might be able to shut her down like Syndra, Annie, and Cassiopeia, but if the Vayne's allowed to build with End, Terminus, and or QSS, it mostly comes down to who can blow up the other person faster. Skirmishers and Assassins may have the stick potential, but Vayne has enough tools to outplay both of them. In fact, I'd argue they're the easiest for Vayne to handle. Overall, Vayne has the right set of tools to give her the advantage in most cases. It's why she's legendarily hated up in top lane. She can easily stop the 4 horsewomen of top lane by kiting them. Yes, that includes Camille and Aurelia, believe it or not. She ruins every tank in the game, Ornn, Sion, etc. Juggernauts like Darius, Urgot, and Mordekaiser are out to permaban her. She's just a bitch and a half to deal with, being an effective counterpick against most conventionally popular top laners. Worse yet, the only ones who convincingly counter her consist of champions that aren't really played by that many people like Teemo, Ryze, Cassiopeia, and Yorick. Or at the very least, you don't see them being played top. Also, Akali, Vladimir, and such can give her trouble, but you typically see those champs mid lane, not top. She is the counterpick top lane. Take a look at the leaderboards of Challenger. Most top laners have a pocket Vayne because she's just that good at turning the game into a 5v4. I would say Malphite's the most common solution for her, but Malphite's the most boring champion in the game whose sole purpose in life is to make Tryndamere, Vayne, Quinn, and Jace players regret being born. Deserved, by the way. Down in bot lane, Vayne's like a time bomb. If you fail to put her down and she gets her hands on 3 items, there's not a single marksman who can fight her 1v1 besides maybe Neela and Crescendum Severum of Helios. She can out DPS a Draven, especially if she can cancel his autos through stealth. That's how strong she is, even with a few items. Fortunately, dealing with her can be fairly simple given she has one of the worst laning phases out of any marksman. But therein lies another issue of Vayne. She will always be a threat to someone. You put a Draven, Tristana, Ezreal behind, you can usually act under the assumption they're useless forever unless you let the game go to 6 items. You can't do the same against Vayne. Even with just a Borg and Rageblade, she can pose a threat if you ignore her. She might not be the biggest threat on the enemy team, but she will be a threat. That's just the nature of % max out true damage. She doesn't need to build damage to actually do damage. Vayne's the only marksman in the game who can build 2 DPS items, then go full tank and you still have to respect her. She just needs Blade of the Ruined King and Rageblade and she's practically full built. Everything else is just whatever she feels like. Terminus for general protection and a bit more DPS, or with Zend if you're fighting mages. Chalkshell for general protection, or Randuin's to give her more bulk against other ADCs. She's the only ADC who doesn't have to cringe to build Marksim or GA. Other marksmen are forced to build no less than 4 crit items in order to meet that 100% breakpoint. Therefore, they can only pragmatically build a defense item for their final purchase. But very few games take you to 6 items, so in reality they're consistently one-shottable. Vayne can start working on tank items by item 4 instead of 6, increasing her margin of safety, which makes it easier for her to respond against champions that normally excel at shutting down marksmen like Fiora, Camille, Sylas, Katarina, Zed, and so on. Recapping everything, problem 1 is that Vayne's percentile true damage makes it impossible to itemize against her no matter what you do. For that matter, due to her % max out true damage, Vayne herself is not burdened by the necessity of building crit items, which gives her way more freedom to build, opening up the privilege of building tank items, which marksmen are not really intended to build. Problem 2 is that the overwhelming majority of champions in this game, at least 3/4 of the cast, has no way to disengage from a Vayne once they're in her sights. Which means the only option is to stand and fight, but problem 3 is that Vayne's one of the hardest marksmen to take on in a head-on confrontation. You either have to cheese her or try to one-shot her. One-shotting becomes difficult when she builds tank items, and cheesing her is also kind of tough to do. The easiest way to stop a Vayne is by ganging up on her 2-1, but even then there are plenty of montages of Vayne literally 1v3ing or 1v4ing. Don't take my word for it, look it up on YouTube. Basically, there's no straightforward, consistently accessible way to shut down Vayne like there is for the other marksmen. Despite being a very skill-explosive champion, she ironically can stat check a lot of people. Not in terms of traditional numbers and bulk, but in the sense that people get screwed by her range, her DPS, her mobility, her stealth, or all of the above. True, other marksmen like Kai'Sa and Aphelios can beat her in terms of versatility, safety, or DPS, but there's a reason she was known as the 1v9 marksman back in the day. If your team doesn't have an easy lockdown tool like a Malphite Ultimate or TF Gold card, Vayne can be a living nightmare to deal with. All of this makes it sound like Vayne's the best ADC in the world, right? Well, if there's anything to be grateful about, it's that she's a very specific type of marksman, a 1v1 duelist hunter marksman. She's not really meant for general usage like Jinx, Ashe, Kai'Sa, and Ezreal. That's why she only hovers around a 5% pick rate. But when she is played, it's in situations where she has the upper hand, usually as a counterpick. Blind picking Vayne is pretty much an auto loss, but blind picking into Vayne can be just as irritating. She's a counterpick focused champion, meaning naturally when you come across her, it's when you're in a bad matchup or have a team comp that she can deal with. So it makes sense why people harbor resentment towards her. They usually only see her when she's making their life a living hell. There's a bit of anecdotal negativity bias for sure. But I mean, when isn't there? People hate stuff not because they're broken, but because they remember key things about them that made playing the game really unpleasant. Vayne's the same way. Much like how Yona, Shaco, and Tahm Kench make you want to crash out, she too is rage-inducing. In the case of top lane, at the very least for the likes of Teemo, Vlad, Gnar and stuff, they crumble to pieces when you try to all-in them. But nothing is more infuriating than Vayne top. You literally cannot play the game against her. Just ask the challenger players, they can all attest to this. Anyway, that concludes my episode on why everyone hates Vayne, a truly unusual marksman who isn't exactly what you would call a Val's Nightmare or a 2 New Year's champ, but is uniquely stupid to deal with in her own way. Let me know your thoughts on Vayne in the comments down below whether you agree or disagree with my points. For now though, if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why Everyone Hates videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.